Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial video on object-oriented programming in C++ for beginners. From now on, from and the subsequent tutorial videos, we'll move on to Visual Studio. We are using Windows. So why the switch from code blocks to Visual Studio is Visual Studio is the one of the ultimate programming IDE available on Windows. That is especially true for C++. People who are very much interested, they can continue with code blocks or switch over from one IDE to another IDE. Our intention to move on from code blocks to Visual Studio is to move on from very amateur level to the more professional environment. So this is applicable for all users, including the beginners. We just the advantages of having Visual Studio, especially on Windows, is you have a code completion advantage, which is very much lacking in code blocks. So as you move on to writing more bigger and bigger uh, programs, the IDE becomes a bottleneck. So you can keep on playing around with code blocks with small examples, but once you start using standard template library, especially like vectors and queues, which will be used in the subsequent tutorials, just to demonstrate how to write object programming using STL, standard template library. So the IDE becomes a bottleneck. So welcome to this tutorial series. We will start using Visual Studio on Windows. For example, Mac OS X, they can use Xcode of the preferred version, and for Linux users, you can use your own favorite IDE like code blocks or Eclipse, or even NetBeans is available. So as you prefer. So now on the continuous series, this series is only on object oriented programming in C++ and not on any specific IDE. So the programmers watching these videos can choose their own favorite IDEs. So just demonstrate a few quick example of how to get started with Visual Studio on Windows. So this is a Visual Studio. Now we are using Visual Studio 2017. So you go for File, New Project. So we'll be creating in our directory. So we'll start with .2 tutorial 2. So press OK. So as you can see, there are some extra files that is being used by Visual Studio to have their own Windows environment and using Windows kits. This is not applicable for Linux and Mac OS X. So we'll just remove the headers and the source file of PCH and rename that to as main.cpp, same like code blocks. So there is one more control S for save. So there is one more changes to be made. You go for file, account settings, probably no, tools, options, because there is one changes you have to make. Okay, let's go for project, C++ precompile headers. Oh, you come to project, main properties, come to C++, come to precompiled headers. So you go to here, precompiled header, and put not using precompiled headers, and press OK. So you don't have to use all the precompiled headers files like pch.h and pch.cpp. So we do a standard C++ environment. So if it's in the debug form, it doesn't matter. So just press this. So you get hello world. So we are not using any precompiled headers. We just use a standard C++ environment. So as you can see, I just showed how to remove the precompiled header properties. So go to, let's begin. Let's go to project. Let's go to that projects. Come to C++ configuration properties, C++ precompiled headers, and go here and say not using precompiled headers. say apply and say OK, and say debug or build. Let's go to build. Let's rebuild solution and press this play button so it can work, so it sees the hello world. This is just specific to Visual Studio users. So let's create files just like tutorial number 2 we had. So go for click the project, right click, and then add, then new item. So first you will add CPP. So CPP will make to .2. So we need another header for the source file. So we go for same add new item. So this time we go for header .2 header. So let's create the class called .2, and then we create public access specifier, we create constructor, we create destructor, then we create private, same like created a code blocks int count. Let's create access getter setter methods. So int get count void set count, this count, int this count. So we copy paste into the source folder. First we include .2 header. So in .2 header we had to add using namespace standard, so that we can use, and .2 is the namespace for this project. So we create for all, then create the body, open in curly brace. So we just copy paste. No, we just create it separate. So this is the destructor, this is the constructor, and this is the get count and the void count, and the return type is int, and setting the count with the data type int. So we use the pointer type of specification to access the member variable count equals this count, and then next we go to get count. So return this count. So we have this. So let's go to main and include the .2 header. Let's create an instance of the object .2. Let's set count to 77. Let's print out the value of count. So this is the same as the previous tutorial files. So we just created a header and using the namespace standard, so that you can use iostream properly, because iostream will be included in the main file. So if you want any specific things to do in cout, you have to include any standard library like iostream. If you want to use cout from the main class object other than the main, so if we here in the main we are using cout, standard here, so you can remove standard because and put using namespace standard. So cout actually belongs to the namespace called standard. So if you want to use any cout in the class source file, then we have to include in the that class header file names using namespace standard and using hash include iostream. So we have the constructor and the destructor. We have a getter setter method, and we have a private variable member variable called count, and we are not initializing anything in the constructor or are not deleting any destructor because we don't have any pointer variables to release memory using the keyword called delete. So we just had the getter setter functions, which is popularly known as method, and we include that header in the main CPP, which has the main function, and created an instance of .2. Then we set the count variable to 77, and we are trying to display the count, meaning get the value of the count and put it to display using cout. So let's see where everything is fine. So as people can see, hello world is printed because this is the first cout line, and the second cout line is trying to print towards the value of count, and we had set the value of count to 77, so we will see the value of 77. So as you people can see how fast it is to get the things done in Visual Studio, especially on Windows, and Xcode on Mac OS X also. So on Linux you can use NetBeans or Eclipse, CDT, or some other like gedit or even Emacs or something like that, and do it in command line as you please. So people can choose what kind of their favorite method of using the I mean how they actually write the source files and the header files, and how they compile the entire project is up to the programmer. Some people like to prefer to do it command line, especially in the Linux world. Maybe some people want to do the same thing in the Mac OS X world as well. So on Windows it's better to use Visual Studio because it is very easy to use IDE for C++ development especially, and it has very good code completion, so that you can use all the STL libraries with ease. As you can see how fast we actually did the T2 development. So we are ready to move on to the next step in object-oriented programming. So as you can come back and see to the header, there are two access specifiers, public and private. Another one, protected, will cover in the later. So what you can do is here for the next few minutes we'll actually do an what can do. So inheritance, the C++ actually supports multiple inheritance as well. Multiple inheritance, but it is preferred to use only single inheritance, and we'll be covering that inheritance and some polymorphism in the subsequent tutorials. For this tutorial this tutorial video is now to just get on with your favorite IDE, so that you get up to speed type of programming. So I will end this tutorial video. Please stay tuned for the subsequent tutorial videos that's coming up in the tutorial series for object-oriented programming in C++. Thanks for staying with me, and thanks for watching. Please stay tuned. Bye.